the video on. I appreciate it. Okay, so all disclaimers out of the way. Again, my name is Alex Hall. I'm an assistant dean in the office of the Dean of Students. The Dean of Students office encompasses a number of units. And so our office, or the Dean of Students, oversees and kind of coordinates and collaborates with the Office of New Student Programs, as well as Fraternity and Sorority Life, student engagement, some of our centers, student centers and services. And it also encompasses the folks who are kind of in the main office, the central office, which is in Peabody Hall. If you've ever had a chance to come to an admissions tour, kind of in person on grounds, which you may or may not have given your admission cycle, but if you did, then we're in the second floor of that building. It's right in the center of grounds, right behind Newcomb Hall and the bookstore in that area. The folks who are in the central office and the Peabody Hall office, we refer to ourselves as generalists. And so kind of day in and day out, we focus on supporting students who have any number of kind of primarily non-academic need while during their time at UVA. We serve all students at UVA. We take them on a walk-in basis, we take referrals, we take calls, emails. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the crux of what we do is if a student has some sort of need or concern, which can very much include some sort of safety need or concern, then we are there to try to help you figure that out, help you navigate it, make sure that students are referred to resources and to support either proactively or reactively if something has come up that has become a barrier or a difficulty during your time at UVA. I am here as one of those generalists. One of those things that we do, like I said, is supporting student safety needs. And during the next kind of time that we have together, I want to cover a couple of things. One, I want to talk about our shared work of student and community safety. And I say shared and our because my office plays a big part in that, as do our partners across grounds that I'm going to be talking about as resources, but you all also play a big part in that. It is definitely a partnership in addressing community safety and personal safety during your time at UVA. I'm also going to talk about key safety resources, both programmatic and office-based resources that you can refer to and engage with, again, both proactively, or if a concern were to come up. I'm going to talk about some kind of best practices, a couple of common pitfalls that we see our students falling into, sticky situations, outcomes, and then at the very end, I'm going to get into Q&A. All right, so before we get started with kind of specific resources, offices, those types of things, I did want to start by talking about Charlottesville and UVA and thinking about the environment and the community that you're going to be living and learning in for the next couple of years. You may or may not know a lot about Charlottesville, but it's a fairly small city. And the university is a pretty big footprint in that city, both physically, kind of geographically, and in terms of the population of people that live and work and play in Charlottesville. We are, I would say, generally speaking, a pretty low crime in terms of the crime rates around town, but just like any other city, we do have crimes that occur. Like any other locality, and that includes crimes of opportunity like thefts, burglaries, excuse me. I was actually in another presentation with a colleague of mine from UPD, University Police Department, recently, who was saying that theft is actually the #1 crime that's reported to them, to the university police. And then we also have other crimes of opportunity that would occur in any other city. This is not intended to scare you because generally this is a relatively safe community, though that is, again, relative to your prior experiences, but it's simply to remind you that we are not a complete bubble. It can feel like a bubble to our students. I'm a former UVA undergrad, and I remember that feeling very strongly, but it is not a complete bubble, and everyone who is part of the university community does need to play an active role in kind of thinking about how we're addressing community safety. And while crimes against other people are particularly low on grounds, and the vast majority of our community members support and care for one another, just like the community members in your high schools or your prior institutions, if you're transferring, you can't assume that everybody that you interact with during your time on grounds and certainly off grounds is a member of the UVA community. And moreover, it is possible that members of the UVA community, they're fallible humans, and they can also engage in activities that are illegal or unsafe, or could harm others, or, could be bad choices. And so we really want you to be thoughtful and vigilant about your interactions with others all the time, right? And so we are founded on this basic idea of trust, but we also want you to be thoughtful and about your safety at all times. So here's a good example. You might hear either prior to coming here or after coming here about this example that relates to the honor committee, or the honor system, right? So you might hear that the honor system is so prolific that you can leave your laptop and your valuables out on the library table while you go to grab coffee. And while they may be there when you get back, keep in mind that all of our libraries are public. We're a state institution. Anybody can come and go from UVA libraries. And so a modified version of that, where you are, engaged with members of your community, but thoughtful about the safety of yourself and your belongings, is that you take the valuables with you, or you ask a friend who's nearby to watch it and grab the coffee for them, right? So the idea is not that this is a vastly terrible or unsafe place to be, but that we are part of a broader kind of ecosystem, and we want to be thoughtful about the ways that we're moving through the world. I'll also get into additional kind of resources and tips and recommendations for safety specifically for much of the rest of our time together. So speaking of which, let's get into the kind of nitty gritty. I want to start by talking about my office, the Dean of Students office. And like I said, ODOS, or the Dean of Students, Office of the Dean of Students, encompasses lots of different units, but the centralized office that houses the generalist folks are the ones that are really most relevant here. We provide that kind of generalist support for needs, including safety. We also consult with students or other friends of students, parents, community members, kind of proactively if they have a concern about safety or well-being. We assist with a lot of referrals for students as needed. We do connect with police at times if needed, to kind of provide introductions and to be responsive to safety needs in that way. We have a great relationship with our university police, as well as the local community police, which I'll talk about in more detail in a moment. And we also assist with concerns about safety for yourself, right? So that could include harm to self, but it also could be the safety in your living situation, or your living situation at home, or friends or intimate partners around you. We assist students in engaging with resources if they have concerns around any of those things. Students can get in touch with us any number of ways. They can email us, they can call, they can walk in during business hours. Like I said, we're in Peabody Hall where admissions is. And so any student can kind of get in touch with us, anybody in that office during business hours during the day. Additionally, we have what we refer to as the Dean on Call rotation. So beyond business hours, there is always a member of the Dean of Students staff who is reachable 24/7. The way that anybody can reach us is by calling the non-emergency university police number, which is 924-7166. You can also just Google UVA non-emergency police number and asking to speak to the Dean on Call. So it doesn't require to make any reports to the police or to even share anything about what you're calling about. You just say, hi, I'm calling to speak to the Dean on Call, and you get patched through with whoever is on call at that time. And what we do in that Dean on Call rotation is outside of business hours, when we know that things can still come up, we assist with kind of triaging and responding to emergencies or crises that come up that are looking for kind of
session. He was an optional one. I said I would log in.
Make sure that you're muted if you haven't already done.
Hey, Alex, you don't have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Very often the types of concerns that we're responding to or supporting in those after hour calls are various types of mental health concerns that have come up, and mental health emergencies. Also, a student has been missing for a while and we realize that we haven't seen them for a while. They might call after hours. We work really closely with RAs who have concerns after hours. We'll also partner with folks in offices like University Police, Charlottesville Police, and CAPS, counseling and psychological services, to kind of provide an immediate response to those concerns after hours, because all of those resources are also available 24/7 in some manner. I mentioned your RAs, and they're another great frontline source of support and resources related to safety if you are going to be living on ground. So all of our first years are, many of our upper class students are also going to be living on ground. So if there are any transfer students in this presentation who are also going to be living on grounds, this applies to you as well. But they're terrific frontline response, right? When you think about them, safety may not be the first thing that comes to mind that they're there for. They're also there to build connections and community and help you navigate grounds and kind of university life generally. But they can also be a great safety resource. That could be proactively if you're thinking about kind of the safety of your home for the next year or so, or they could be a wealth of knowledge to address a particular concern if one were to come up. They're also really well connected with the Dean on Call group that I mentioned earlier. And so some students are more comfortable engaging with the Dean on Call or other university resources in partnership with their RA because it's somebody that they know. Keep in mind, your RA is the one kind of resource of all the ones that I'm going to be talking about that you're guaranteed to know personally if or before something were to come up that you were concerned about. So keep them in mind as a resource in that way as well. Another resource is our local police. So we have the University Police Department, which is UPD, and then we have the Charlottesville Police Department, or CPD. They are separate entities. Both are fully accredited entities. University Police has all of the kind of authority and ability to address concerns and crimes that your local police jurisdiction does at home. But they work very closely together, especially when responding to an emergent concern. And so if you ever need to call police, you just call 911. You don't have to figure out which jurisdiction am I in, which number do I call. It all gets routed through the same local kind of dispatch, and they decide whoever's closest, they can get there and they can be responsive to a concern. UPD, however, they also do a lot of proactive work. You'll see them kind of on and immediately around grounds. You'll see them as a visible presence on grounds, both kind of during the day and after hours, to kind of proactively be on the lookout for potential concerns and to be really nearby so that if you had a concern, even if it wasn't kind of an emergency, you can always flag an officer down. They can and will arrest if necessary. They do have that ability to do so, but that is not their primary goal. Their primary goal is student safety and support. And if you ever talk to any police officers in UPD, they'll certainly emphasize that. They're not out looking for people to arrest. They're looking for potentially concerning situations that they can kind of provide support for. They're really visible. You'll see them on bikes and cars, on foot. They have these crazy motorized tricycle things that you'll see them zooming around on sometimes. So they're all around. Definitely flag them down if you have a concern, but feel free to stop any of them and say hello sometime. They love to meet students and kind of be out in the community. You might even see Cooper, the support dog, who works with one of our offers, is kind of the cutest mini Australian Shepherd you've ever seen. He's also around grounds with them sometimes. They also do proactive work like offering self-defense classes, bike registrations, safety planning with individual students, and other kind of preventative services. A similar group that is not police, but that works kind of closely with police is a group called the ambassadors. So they're not police officers. They don't have badges. They don't carry weapons, anything like that. They're not armed, but they are very highly visible, and they kind of work very closely with the police as an additional set of kind of boots on the ground, ears and eyes out in the community, again, kind of during the day, but especially after hours. So they're on grounds, but they're also in the immediately adjacent areas where a lot of our off-ground student housing is, where a lot of students kind of choose to live in private housing. And they're really meant to be additional folks who can be an immediate resource that you can flag down as you're walking somewhere to, address a concern or say, I'm by myself, it's after dark, I need to walk up the street to get back to my apartment. Would you mind walking with me? Or I feel like there's something sketchy going on back there. Can you go check it out? So they're kind of an extension of that more formal policing that's done by UPD and CPD, though they are not part of those organizations. They're just a close partnership. Okay, so those are offices and entities and people. I also want to make you aware of kind of not another resource that isn't a person or resources that aren't people, but that are meant to be, again, proactive and responsive ways that you can be aware of potential safety concerns, particularly in our community and geographic area. If you haven't, I encourage you to sign up for UVA Alerts. And we now have, we didn't used to, now have the opportunity for a parent or anybody else that you designate as a member of your family to sign up for UVA Alerts. You literally can just Google UVA Alerts and you'll find it. And you can put in your phone number and your email. And if there are any kind of immediate potential safety concerns in the community, then they blast out the alert. They send it to every computer that's on the UVA network. They ping text messages and they'll send emails. So for example, my office is in the engineering school, and one time there was a potential chemical leak in one of the labs in a building over from me. And so they sent out a message and said, there's a potential chemical leak in this area, stay out of the vicinity, we'll keep you updated. And then when it's cleared, they say kind of all clear, safe to be in that vicinity again. So it's really helpful for kind of knowing what's going on right now. And again, you can also have a parent or kind of family member sign up for additional notifications if they want to kind of be aware of what's going on as well. We don't have it launched just yet that I'm aware of, correct me if I'm wrong, Tab, but we'll also be launching an additional resource that is a kind of app-based resource that will provide additional kind of messaging, but also other functionality around safety that you can have on your phone. Like it'll have a geofencing opportunity where you can say, like, within this specific area, this thing is going on, and you'll only get notifications if you're in or around that specific area. So keep a lookout for that. There will be lots of messaging when that is launched, either at the very end of the summer or maybe early fall. There'll be more information about that for sure. You may also receive during your time here what's called a timely warning, and that goes to your email. And those are required by, there's a federal law called, commonly referred to as the Clery Act, which requires all colleges and universities to make students aware of potential threats, basically ongoing threats that relate to crimes. And so it's possible that you may receive an email at some point that outlines a crime that had occurred recently, and that there may be an ongoing concern about safety related to that crime. And it gives you information about what happened, what they know, what they don't know, and a laundry list of resources to attend to your own safety. And that's really meant to just heighten vigilance at particular times or after particular incidents or concerns that might relate to students in particular. The last kind of resource, I guess, technical or electronic, but it's one of our least high-tech resources I want to make you aware of, is called blue phones or blue light phones. As you walk through grounds, if you haven't had a chance to yet, you'll see them next time you're here. As you walk through grounds, you'll see these kind of posts sticking up at regular intervals that have an old school corded telephone on them and a big bright blue light at the top of them. Those phones connect directly to the police. They connect directly to 911, which, as I mentioned, has a shared dispatch with multiple jurisdictions in the area. And so if you were they were, I think, initially kind of created before everybody had cell phones, but you can lose your cell phone, or your cell phone can be dead, or you can somehow be separated from a group of friends. So if you have kind of an immediate concern about safety, but you don't have a way to call for help yourself, the blue light phones, that's exactly what they're designed for. They're at regular intervals throughout grounds. And an interesting fact about them is that they geolocate, obviously, they know which one is calling at which time. And so I've heard my UPD colleagues kind of say that, let's say you have a concern, a safety related concern, but you don't want to stay there and wait. You want to keep moving. If you were to disconnect or take the phone off of the stand, I guess, like the millennial in me is coming through, I can't even think of the name. But if you were to disconnect one and then keep moving and then disconnect another one, then the safety responders can see, oh, this person is moving in this direction. And so I know how to kind of realize which way they're going, and I can figure out where they're at and meet them. those are blue light phones. Okay, so those are kind of on-grounds resources that are people/offices, and what I would loosely refer to as tech-based. There are also resources around kind of traveling and getting around safely. The first one is Safe Ride, which is run through the university. It's a free kind of after-hours ride service meant for short distances. Kind of in and maybe immediately adjacent to grounds. And so what you do is you call the Safe Ride number, you say I'm in front of Alderman Library and I need to get back to my residence hall, which is up in Hereford College. And they designate pickup points and they'll come pick you up and your friends and they'll take you to where you need to go. It's intended to be short distances and it's really not intended to be kind of an after hours get to the party type resource. But it is intended to be an opportunity for students, especially if they're kind of alone or didn't have another means of feeling like they can safely get from point A to point B after the buses are running, for example, to get to where they need to be and feel like they're doing that with somebody who is within the university community and kind of specifically trained to get folks places safely. If you are not kind of use Safe Ride, we also have kind of a local cab service, Yellow Cab, though cabs are, I think, feeling a little outdated for a lot of us. And so there's Lyft and Uber and all those ride share services. They're a great option to get yourself home safely if you don't want to walk a long distance. The one kind of piece of advice that I would give to anybody who's going to be using those rideshare services is to make sure that you're kind of comparing the information that you get in the app to the person picking you up. There's this campaign out of, I think, a school in California called the What's My Name campaign, where when your cab or your rideshare service shows up, ask them to say your name, make sure that that's the person that you're looking for, compare the license plate, let your friends know, share your location if you want, just make sure that if you're using a rideshare service, you're aware that that is kind of run and staffed by people who are largely outside of the university community. And so you want to be thoughtful about it. Maybe ride with a friend, that kind of thing. And then we also do have a university bus system and it does run late night. There's kind of a regular business hours or regular hours outside of business hours. I think it starts at like 6 a.m. where they run lots of routes around grounds. And then they have a late night service that's a little bit more limited and maybe not quite as often, but that also runs routes in and around grounds. It's a great safety resource. It's also just a great resource. We're kind of a sprawling campus. And so depending on where you live or how far apart your classes are with a 15-minute interval between, they can be a really great, also there's a ton of hills here. And so they're a really great resource for just getting around. I would highly recommend that when you get here, in one of those first few days, carve out an hour or two and just ride them around and kind of get a sense of the routes, get a sense of how to kind of change buses if that's not something you're familiar with. I was not when I came here. I'm from a very rural area. And so kind of get a sense of them and which ones you need to take to classes. And that'll also give you a sense of if I'm going to a friend's dorm on Thursday evening for movies and popcorn, then I know which route will take me back at 10 p.m. when we finish up the movie. Okay. The last type of safety resource that I want to talk about pertains particularly to the safety or safety related to mental health, and that's counseling and psychological services. We call them CAPS for short. I mentioned them earlier, but it's worth repeating or it's worth reiterating that they're an excellent safety resource. If you're considering safety because you or somebody you have concerns about risk of harm to self or kind of that form of safety where it's not somebody else, but concerned about your own kind of mental health and well-being or that of a friend. They have walk-in hours. They have extensive information that I'm sure you'll hear about multiple times about how to kind of engage with them proactively. But in emergency situations, they also have a 24/7 kind of response mechanism like the Dean on Call, where a student can always reach a CAPS counselor 24/7 if they have an emergent mental health concern. And so that's definitely worth keeping in mind as you consider safety as a broad concept and not just your physical safety. All important, just different types of safety to consider. Okay. Beyond specific resources, I wanted to touch a little bit on just some general tips and ideas related to attending to your own safety. The first is thinking about safe drinking. If you're going to be under 21, keep in mind that it is going to be illegal in the state of Virginia to be drinking. But if you're over 21 or if you choose to drink, please be thoughtful about what we call risk mitigation strategies and how you're going to do so in the safest possible way, right? So that includes the way that you're consuming alcohol, kind of the amount. We think about the strategies that most of us have heard, making sure you're eating dinner, pacing, setting a limit ahead of time, hydrating, being with a friend who can kind of monitor and notice your level of intoxication. But we're also thinking about safety related to lowered inhibitions and less kind of vigilance about your surroundings. And so that also gets back to being with a friend, having a plan to get home at the end of the night, holding yourself and your friends accountable to their plan. These are all things that you probably have heard before, but they bear repeating because the basics are really important to keep in mind if you do choose to drink at some point during your time here. It's also worth noting that recreational marijuana has recently become legal in the state of Virginia. However, there is still an age restriction and it is still fully restricted and illegal on grounds, which includes in all of the residence halls. There's a federal law that prohibits it on school properties, and we are a public school. And so if that is something that you were to choose to engage with, just be thoughtful about the kind of laws and restrictions that surround marijuana in the same way that they surround alcohol. I've talked a little bit about crimes of opportunity earlier, like thefts. If you think about like a mugging or something like that, they do occur in Charlottesville and even on grounds. And so it's important that you're alert and aware of your surroundings all the time, but especially at night, I would say, which is really just related to lowered visibility and potentially less people around, depending on which part of grounds or the community you're in. So always be thoughtful about your surroundings, aware of who's around you. Take your headphones out when you're walking. Try not to look at your phone the whole time you're walking. Stay with groups of folks that you know and trust, those kinds of things. All of these things are very basic and things you've probably heard before, but again, bear repeating. Think about the safety of your home. And so that could be in the residence hall. Again, your RAs will be a great resource there to think about how to maximize your safety there. But if you're going to be living off grounds at any point during your time here, as an upperclassman, you're going to be thinking about potentially your private apartment or the private house that you share with friends. Think about the lighting in wherever you park your car. Think about having good working locks on all the doors and making sure that all your roommates are locking them at the end of the night. If you're living in a residence hall, think about not allowing folks to kind of tailgate in behind you if you are entering the building, which is, all of our residence halls have kind of multiple layers of security and they require some sort of swipe to enter the building. You must be a resident to be able to get into the building. And so if you're a resident, don't let somebody else just kind of scoot in behind you unless it's somebody that you know personally who also lives in the building. I know it's awkward and kind of our natural inclination to hold a door open for folks, but we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about who you're letting into that space because that's your home, right? You wouldn't also just let a stranger walk in your front door at your parents' house. Okay, if and when you are moving through grounds, think about direct lighted paths if it's after dark. If you notice that there are concerns around kind of the physical environment on grounds, let us know. That's another thing. There's a group of safety, some kind of safety committee, I couldn't tell you the name of it, from folks across the university who do walkthroughs every year. And they kind of say, oh, that's a really dark area. We should make sure that light is fixed. Or even really basic, like this step is janky and wobbly. We need to make sure that's fixed so that folks walking aren't gonna, roll an ankle, that kind of thing. And so we're very attuned to the physical environment that we have here. And if you do notice a concern, let us know, because it's definitely something we can fix. The last thing I would generally say is that if you are, especially again, in the evenings when visibility is reduced, there may be less people around, kind of on the evenings or weekends. then make sure you're letting your friends know your general plans, and better yet, be with friends. If you're going to be, out and about on the weekend, if you're like going downtown to see a concert on the downtown mall, or if you're going to dinner on the corner, travel with folks that you know and trust, because the more people you have, the more people or more opportunity you have to kind of be vigilant about what's going on around you and to be responsive and care for each other if something were to come up. Lastly, trust your gut. If something feels off, then that is a good reason to make sure that you're engaging with the resources that I've been talking about, right? So calling the police, for example. Our police will always tell you that they have a very low bar for wanting to be responsive to a concern. You don't need to wait until an imminent kind of physical harm is actually happening for you to call the police. Even if something just feels off and you feel physically unsafe, go ahead and call 911. They'd much rather be responsive, make sure you feel comfortable, answer questions you have, even if it turns out that they don't find anything in particular in the vicinity, than for you to not call and it turns out that there is a concern right there. So if nothing else, trust your gut and call in those resources if you have a safety concern. I want to take a little bit of a tangent for just a moment to talk about kind of the other arm of what our police officers do in the area. Like I said, they do have the ability to arrest, and they do arrest or cite students depending on what the nature of the kind of charge is. And I want to give you a brief sense of what happens if that is the case. The Dean of Students Office works really closely with UPD and CPD. At the end of every one of their shifts, we get notifications if any of our students have had interactions with police. And that interaction could range from an arrest to a citation related to, for example, underage possession of alcohol or drunk in public. And it also includes if a student calls because they had a safety concern, or a student was injured and emergency medical services came and police came with them. It also includes students who have imbibed a lot of alcohol and are transported to the hospital to make sure that they are their physical health and safety is attended to. So we're notified of all of those things. Just like UPD, our primary concern is safety. Our secondary concern is education and learning. And so if a student were to be arrested or transported to the hospital, then they would hear from somebody in my office and they'd be invited to come kind of speak to us about what happened. In the case of an arrest, we're going to kind of assess what happened, what did you learn, what does this mean for you moving forward, and we're going to determine whether there are some educational programs that we can recommend that a student kind of partake in. In some cases, we do have the ability to refer to our more formal adjudicatory bodies, so like the University Judiciary Committee or the Honor Committee, those types of things, but we certainly don't always refer. Sometimes we think that that kind of initial educational intervention is sufficient. And if a student is arrested for an alcohol or drug related offense and they're under the age of 21, then we also have a policy that requires us to speak to one of your parents or guardians. And so that's kind of all wrapped up in our response. If we find out that a student has been arrested, especially for an alcohol or drug related offense. If a student is transported to the hospital for alcohol consumption, we are not looking to charge them with anything and are not going to be referring to any of those formal adjudicatory bodies. We also don't require that we speak to a parent or guardian, because in that case, we would not want to chill reporting. We wouldn't want to deter folks from calling an ambulance, for example, for their friend who's passed out because there was fear about parents finding out. And so we don't necessarily call parents, but we do still have that conversation about what happened, what choices did you make that brought us to this point, what did you learn, what does this mean for you moving forward? And we may still ask that you participate in some kind of additional education or reflection-based, programs through UVA. So those are two of the most common kind of conduct-related concerns that we're responding to, and that's in a nutshell what they look like. The other thing I will say is, even though we, being the Dean of Students Office, don't require contact with parents or guardians after a transport to the hospital, very often it's billed to your insurance. And so in that way, if you're on your parents' insurance, they likely will find out. And so we generally recommend that you preempt that and let your parents know if something like that had happened. Mostly because they're going to want to know, and they're going to want to know that you're safe, and they're going to want to know that what you're doing to prevent yourself from being in that position again. And yeah, they care about you. They don't want that to happen again, because they want to know that you're being safe. Okay. So when I first started, I started off talking about some kind of big picture thoughts and ideas, and got into this nitty gritty, these specifics. And then I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about big picture again. And then I'm going to stop talking finally and see if we have any kind of questions or thoughts in the chat that we want to kind of discuss during the rest of our time together. So big picture, philosophically, the truth is my office, we cannot absolutely guarantee your safety. In fact, nobody can 100% guarantee your safety all the time, not even you. What we're all trying to do together, me, my office, all of the partners and resources that I just kind of ran through in a long, fast laundry list, and you, all of us are trying to work together to mitigate potential concerns and be as thoughtful as we can during your time here, so that you can either try to prevent or know exactly what you can do to be responsive to any concern that might come up during your time here, either for you or for a friend or for other members of the community. So keep that in mind, right? The real emphasis of what I want you to hear today is that there is a lot here for you, but you also have an active role in that. That active role can take a couple of different forms, or lots of different forms. First, we need you to speak up if you have a concern, the idea of see something, say something. And that can be a really specific, immediate, imminent concern, or it can be a generalized, I have a concern about this lack of resource, or I have a concern about the way that the university is or isn't responding to this concern. Like, speak up if you see something and let us know, because that's how we can most actively and effectively partner together. Second, it's really important that you make use of those resources that I just ran through. You don't have to memorize them all. I hope you will remember them, or at least the gist of them, but know that they're going to be widely publicized, widely available. Your RA is going to be emphasizing them. You're going to have apps, you're going to get emails, and really utilize those resources, because that's what they're there for. Third, have a plan and effectively communicate that plan as it relates to your safety, either on a particular kind of Friday night or just generally speaking, right? Be in communication with the people that you know and trust, like your friends, like your RA, even your parents at home to a certain extent, though they may be geographically separated from you. Keep updated and keep communicative about what your plan is, to really be thoughtful about your safety and be vigilant about your safety, and make sure that you're holding yourself and your friends accountable to that plan. And then finally, the last thing I want to kind of emphasize is, if you have a concern about a friend, please call us, right? Because I've mentioned throughout this time that many of these resources apply to if you have a concern about yourself or something that is in your immediate vicinity, but they also apply to if you have a concern that relates to a friend of yours. Maybe you're together, or maybe it's a mental health safety concern. Maybe they called you and they said, this is what happened, I don't know what to do. In those situations, please call in reinforcements. Please engage with us, engage with my office, engage with everybody that I just described, all the resources that I just described. You are not getting your friend in trouble. You are not betraying confidence. You're calling in additional folks to make sure that you're getting wraparound support for somebody who might have a real need. Okay. So there's one last area that is a little bit more difficult to articulate. It's a little squishier and less specific, but I think is worth mentioning because it's something that we're seeing emerging kind of in our community, but also in communities across America, frankly, right now. And that concern is folks who are engaging with each other in really intense encounters, particularly that are based on kind of very different belief systems, particularly online, right? I would say Facebook, but I bet most of you don't have Facebook. I was recently told that Instagram is on its way out as well. But this is kind of an emerging issue that my office is responding to a lot, where students are engaging with each other, are engaging with anonymous folks or with community members in an online forum. And there are fundamental differences of opinion and belief. And the ways that they engage with each other are frankly really somewhere between really unproductive to downright nasty. And that is a really difficult situation to be in for literally anybody. And we want to support our students as if they find themselves in a position where they are kind of caught in that crossfire with other folks. However, we have to be mindful of the fact that the First Amendment guarantees the right to free speech. And so a lot of that kind of nasty behavior that occurs, or language or discussion, whatever phrasing you want to use, that occurs, especially in an online environment, while potentially reprehensible, potentially inconsistent with our community values, or with my personal values, or with your personal values, is in fact protected, right? And so rather than, some students will come to my office, for example, talk about what's going on and want us to intervene, or want various offices at the university to intervene. And when it's something that is really based in difference of opinion and premised on a right to free speech, then we're unable to intervene. And rather, our role in that situation is to support our students in kind of working through it, right? And also being thoughtful about when and how you can best engage with others in a meaningful and productive way. And keep in mind that some folks would say that the best solution to speech is more speech, right? And so we're also going to be encouraging our students and our community members to be thinking about what they're putting out into the world. Everybody has said things that they regret, or that they maybe didn't put a lot of thought into before they put it into words. And so we understand that that's going to happen, and that's part of your kind of journey in learning how to engage with other folks in the world. And so we want to help through that, but we are not going to necessarily intervene or address a specific concern unless it relates to physical safety or threats or harassment. And those are the places where we have more ability to kind of address it on a university level. So I know that that's kind of a note to end on, but I think that it's something that you may very well encounter, or a friend may very well encounter during your time here. It relates to safety because some students will kind of come to us and say, I feel unsafe. And the question is, are we talking about your physical safety, or have there been threats or implied threats to your physical safety, or you're talking about kind of your feelings of emotional safety? Both very important, but two very different responses and ways that we're going to support and provide resources for those needs. Okay, so on that heavy but important note, I finally covered all the points that I wanted to hit regarding student safety. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it gives you a sense of what's out there and what our approach is. And again, emphasizes the fact that we view this very much as a partnership and something that we want to do with you together during your entire time here. So that when you come here, you can feel like you're doing that on a safe foundation and can really focus on the things you came here to do as a student and a person. Okay, so I am going to pull up the chat and see what questions. Let's see here, close. So far, I don't see any questions, but feel free to drop them in the chat box, either directly to me or just open to the entire group. Or if you'd like to unmute yourself and actually, be able to talk rather than just be talked at today, I also welcome anything related to anything that I just discussed.
I have a quick question.
Sure. Hi, Liz.
I was just wondering if there was a website or something with a lot of this information on it somewhere. And
Yeah.
If so, could you copy and paste that in the chat?
Yeah, let me, so I'm gonna pull up a different screen so I can't see you all right now. So the Office of the Dean of Students has a lot of resources which relate to safety, but also other ones. I'm going to drop this in the chat. Copy. Okay. Oops. Everyone. Okay, so if you go to that link, it lists a ton of resources. One of them says, I think, safety and security or something like that. Safety and support resources. So that would be most directly related to everything I was just talking about. But as an added bonus, you'll see there are lots of other kind of groupings and areas of support that also fall under that umbrella Office of the Dean of Students that you might also find useful in the future. So that's a good starting place. And then any of the other things that I just mentioned, honestly, feel free to just Google and you'll find it. You all are very adept at finding things online, I'm sure. And frankly, most of the time, that's how I find the UPD website. Or earlier today, as I was kind of making sure I had all my points together for this presentation, I literally Googled UVA Alerts to make sure I was giving you the right info. And so if you can kind of Google UVA and then whatever it is, close enough, you'll certainly get to the right place, in addition to that kind of roundup that I just dropped in there.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. Are there other questions about anything I discussed or anything that I didn't discuss that seems relevant? Anything that you thought you'd hear about that I didn't mention? Anything about grounds or UVA generally? I'm an alum, an employee, and actually also a current student. I'm almost at my doctorate, so I can speak to any of those technically. We have a couple minutes left. Okay, well, I won't torture you all sitting here in a silent, oh, thanks, Faith. I won't torture you all sitting here in a silent room staring at me. So you just gained 8 minutes back in your day. And I hope that some of this was helpful. I'm going to drop my email address in here so that if you want to write it down and come up with questions later, or just wanted to follow up with me in some way about anything I talked about or anything unrelated, the term generalist is true. We cover all kinds of stuff in my office. Then please do reach out to me anytime. I'll also stick around for a couple minutes. So if you'd prefer to kind of ask a question or just chat in these last few minutes, then I'll be here. Otherwise, thank you so much for really sticking it out to a late afternoon session on not the most exciting and stimulating topic ever. I hope you picked up something helpful, and we can't wait to welcome you all in person in the fall. And until then, enjoy the rest of your summer. Okay. I don't know if any of you guys were hoping to, may have just left it up. Okay, there's a few folks left. It may just be up. My email address is in there. So if you wanted to follow up with me separately, please reach out anytime.